Hello and welcome back to the Unstuck movement. I am your host, Rob Z. Today we have the incredible John Grandy with us, who is a pastor and certified life coach with Resilient Coaching. Today we're talking anger, regulating your emotions, awareness, parenting, resilience, growth, perspective, among many other things. And John, it's awesome to have you here. By the way, I guess just to clear the air, I've been doing coaching with you now for a number of months. So it's kind of cool here to reverse the rules as we have a conversation about what you do. And you've been incredibly helpful just for me in my spiritual journey, my walk with Jesus, and just in life in general. So I want to thank you for that off the bat. But I do want to ask you a question right up front, because we talk about anger, especially for guys, right? Anger is one of the emotions that comes up the most when you're stressed or when you're sad. That anger can be the first one that shows up. But how do we uncover what is healthy anger in us, and what is the opposite of healthy anger? How do we know the difference?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that I've wrestled with personally, and it's just an honor to be here today having this conversation with you, Rob. So thank you for having me. I would say this is a question that has changed my life, because when I thought about where was I stuck? Where did I need to get unstuck? The thing that I thought about was my anger. I have stories that I could tell of things that I did in anger that I regret. But when someone shared this question with me, there's actually two questions that work together. I don't even remember where I learned it, but I'll never forget them. The two questions are, what boundary has been crossed and what injustice am I experiencing? These are questions we can ask to uncover healthy anger. Because when a boundary has been crossed, I feel a sense of injustice. That's how these two are connected. And it's appropriate for me to be angry. It's a healthy response to someone disrespecting my boundaries or to experiencing an injustice. And therefore, we can use our anger in a healthy way in response to those things.
So for yourself, throughout the years, how has knowing this information, how has this benefited you with your anger? Because, I mean, at least speaking from experience, I'm usually at odds with my anger. I don't want to be angry, right? But I am. And what do I do about that? Something that you and I have talked about quite a bit. So for yourself, how is that, knowing this, how has that changed things for you over the years?
Yeah, I think in the past, I'd feel stuck in it. I wouldn't know what to do with my anger, and I would just stuff it, and it would eventually turn into rage, like just kind of erupting in moments that felt out of my control. And like, wow, I just reacted to that situation in a way that was uncalled for. So there's something below the surface that is simmering, that is now erupting like a volcano within me, you know? And so those are ways that I experienced anger that I had to learn how to have a healthier, better response to that. And these questions help me with that. But I mean, I have all kinds of stories I could share about how I, slipped into unhealthy anger in those moments, or also learned how to have a healthy expression of anger as well. So what do you want to know?
I want to know what's wrong with you, for crying out loud. Why are you so angry? No, it's really fascinating. I'm just speaking from my own experience. I've always thought, man, anger, this is not good to have this anger. I shouldn't have this. Right. Instead of being like, okay, I'm angry. Like you had just said, I'm angry for a reason. Like there's something here. So what boundary was crossed, or did you say what injustice had occurred?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking about that, not saying, and also in that, also saying, okay, even though this boundary was crossed, it doesn't mean that I'm right still in being angry. Right. It doesn't mean that I'm right in the situation. It just means that it's okay to be angry and to understand why it's happening.
Yeah.
Because to have it be out of control like that is chaos. And like you said, we tend to bury that, and that turns to rage.
Yeah. So a simple story here, this is a good starting place, because it can be very complex or very simple. And when I was learning this in the beginning, I remember my wife had gone to visit her parents. They live about a half hour away from us. And so I was with the kids and we were just hanging out, and it was a couple hours, and I started to feel frustrated and angry that I hadn't heard from her. And so I literally asked myself these questions, like, what boundary has been crossed? Why am I angry? Like, just asking the question, why am I angry? And immediately the answer came to me. Well, she didn't tell me when she was coming home. I'm glad that she could be with her parents. I want her to be there. I'm glad they're having a good time and like losing track of time, but we're waiting for her. So when is she going to be back? And just asking myself that question allowed me to then communicate and say, hey, when do you think you'll be home? So something as simple as that is knowing, what to expect, and clarifying that expectation can help to move anger in a healthy direction. And what surprised me is when I asked that question and then pursued her with an answer, the anger was gone.
Mm-hmm.
It like all of a sudden I knew what to do with it instead of getting stuck in it and then festering, and, bitterness and resentment can start to grow under the surface. And if I didn't say anything, then when she got home, I'd just explode on her or, take it out on her and unintentionally like ruin the amazing afternoon she just had. Right. So that's what happens if we don't ask those questions.
Yeah, that's a really good, you just gave a really good description of that, because I've been in that situation dozens of times where it's like I'm getting, and specifically like at home with my kid, wondering like, because there's no clarity on when's she coming home or when's the next thing happening or whatever it might be. And so that's what does it. It's the unknown, the unanswered questions that lead to you assuming, right? And then, so if you figure out, I just don't know when she's going to be home, asking the question is next. That's a huge part of it, because that brings that relief, that release of like, okay, now I know what to expect. Now I know what's coming, and you've communicated effectively. And boy, man, especially with people who are angry at each other, it is because they haven't talked about it 99% of the time. They haven't worked through it.
Sure.
And first is working through it with yourself. So that's a great place to start. Thank you for that. That's really good information.
Yeah.
I can understand that completely. So this platform, just to welcome everybody here, is the Unstuck movement. I created this platform to help people find breakthrough in their life. So we all get stuck at different places. You're probably stuck somewhere right now in some regard in your life, and finding breakthrough is everything. So I love bringing people on the podcast who have been stuck, who have real testimonies, true testimonies of breakthrough that they've experienced. We're sponsored by the Connected Leaders Academy. Check out connectedleadersacademy.com and the Pro Podcaster Academy. Launch your platform, streamline it, and monetize it at robzwentz.com. Today, as we've already been talking to him, I want to fully introduce him. John Grandy is a pastor, certified life coach who founded Resilient Coaching to help people discover purpose through pain. With over 20 years of pastoral experience and deep roots in Detroit, he specializes in guiding others through emotional healing and personal growth. And I want to talk to you about the regulation spectrum and share a visual for it for anybody who's watching. Can you talk about, I think this is something that you created. I find it fascinating and incredibly helpful. So walk us through, why did you create the regulation spectrum, and how has it changed the way that you help people?
Yeah, let's start with what we believe about emotions. We were just talking about anger, and is there a healthy expression of anger? For much of my life, the answer was no. It's wrong. You just have to eliminate it. But now that we're talking about asking questions to find healthy anger, we have to ask ourselves, which I've done, is there a healthy expression of every emotion? And my answer is yes, there is. Which has also been really freeing. And it's also caused a lot of wrestling, because how do you have a healthy expression of fear, of anxiety, of embarrassment, of frustration? These harder, more difficult emotions. Let's just use embarrassment, for example. A healthy expression of embarrassment would be vulnerability. I'm going to be vulnerable about why I feel embarrassed right now, which can lead to some insecurity and can lead to wrestling with some parts of our identity that we didn't know were there, that we feel insecure about. But then us exploring that invites us to embrace our true selves. What is it about me that I can celebrate, and don't give a rip what people think, because that's me, and I'm going to celebrate who I am. So there's this whole journey that you can go on by staying curious about your emotions instead of deleting them or canceling them or only accepting the ones that we like. We tend to enjoy joy and happiness, but sadness and the harder emotions we want to just get rid of. And that's not possible. So in order to find a healthy expression of emotion, we have to ask ourselves, like, where are we on the spectrum of emotion? And if you picture a scale from 1 to 10, this is the spectrum. Oftentimes it's hard to quantify emotions because they feel so chaotic. They feel so unquantifiable. And so that's where this is helpful, because it helps us put emotions on a scale from 1 to 10. So on the low end of the scale, you have low dysregulation. These would be emotions of anxiety, distress, sometimes depression, sadness. Then you've got the high end of the spectrum from 7 to 10, which are emotions of anger, of fight, flight, freeze, of intense conflict, where emotions are high. And so that's high dysregulation. The middle is regulation. So that's where we want to end up. That's where we want to move our emotions, but we have to start with where we are. We want to live in regulation, but the reality is every day we face some kind of dysregulation. We need to pinpoint where we are and then do what it takes, to cope in a healthy way and regulate our emotions so we get back into that regulation zone.
Yeah, I mean, because it makes so much sense, because you get triggered by things, which is maybe not the right word to use, but you get pulled in different directions emotionally a lot of the times without even realizing it's happening. Yeah. It happens and you're like, oh, wait, at least for me, a million times, how did I end up here? How did I end up feeling this way? What the heck happened? And to be able to identify that, number one, awareness that, like, I'm in a place that I don't feel good in, and then the awareness of, like, okay, I don't have to be here. Right. That's a great awareness in itself. But then being able to choose to get yourself back to regulation is everything. So absolutely. If somebody's watching, they can see this. If not, you'll have to listen along. But on the second part of this PDF, you have traits of low dysregulation, regulation, and high dysregulation. Would you like to talk through these and how we can shift from one to the other?
Sure. You mentioned trigger, and that's actually a great word here, because I describe a trigger as a response to the past in the present. You're actually not reacting to what you're going through now. You're reacting to something you've already been through. And that's why it feels so disorienting and why we feel kind of out of body, because you may be with your spouse or with a coworker and you're reacting to something they said, but you're actually not reacting to them. You're reacting to the person who said it 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it hurt you. And now they're saying the same thing. And so it's very confusing and disorienting. That's why this process of stopping and regulating is so important, so that we can pinpoint, okay, where is this coming from? And when we do, then we start to feel the harder emotions. And just to read the ones on the low dysregulation part of it, we feel shame, we feel despair, numbness, depression, hopelessness, isolation, self-hatred, apathy, inadequacy, and then shutdown. Mm-hmm. So the last word on the list is kind of the accumulation of the others. We get to a point where we just feel flooded and we just shut down. Mm-hmm. And that's oftentimes our experience in low dysregulation. Do you want me to walk through all three of them?
Well, I just think I'm looking at this and I'm like, because you can name the place that you're in and choose to be in a different place. Yeah. So you went through low dysregulation of all of the low things, right? What about the high dysregulation? Because that's something I feel like people would be a little more difficult to understand. I understand shame, despair, those things, but the high end of it, talk about that a little bit, because I think that's really important because that's where a lot of people end up living a lot of their day.
Sure. So this feels like frustration, rage, hostility, anxiety, terror, fight, flight, freeze, critical, overwhelmed. These are the emotions we feel in high dysregulation. And the 3 F's, fight, flight, freeze, there's actually a fourth now that they've found, which is faint, which would be similar to overwhelmed. you would think that those could, especially freeze, would be on low dysregulation because you're freezing. But what you might not realize is that internally it's anything but freezing. You are going 100 miles an hour inside.
Right.
And that's why we put these on the high end of the spectrum, because there's a lot of, cortisol in your body. There's a lot of intense emotion in terms of stress and anxiety when you're in high dysregulation.
Yeah, when you see the word overwhelmed, I mean, that's a word to describe a lot of our culture right now. I mean, I'm sure coaching, you hear that a lot. It comes up all the time. People feel overwhelmed by everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible place to live from. When you find yourself overwhelmed, I mean, obviously the goal is to be whelmed. I don't know if that's a thing or not. You don't want to be underwhelmed either, right? You just want to be whelmed. You want to be in that regulatory spot. And I love how your regulation zone also they are the fruits of the spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. But you also threw in hope. What made you throw in hope in there?
Yeah, I think, again, the last word is an accumulation. So when you are in low dysregulation, you literally see that word there, hopelessness. You feel hopeless when you're there. You even feel hopeless and overwhelmed when you're in high dysregulation. Like, I don't know how to get out of this. And so hope being the opposite of that, and the cure of, hey, maybe there's a way that I can actually navigate my emotions in a healthy way. That creates a lot of hope. And that becomes momentum that we can take into a healthy lifestyle, a regulated lifestyle. And the more you practice this, the better you get at it. So you recognize dysregulation right away. You do what it takes to get regulated. And we could talk about, what does that mean? What do you do? There's specific coping strategies you can do. Then you more quickly get back to regulation and you spend more of your life there. Whereas if you're not aware of this, you're actually living a lot of your life in dysregulation without even knowing it. And you're not experiencing much regulation at all. So there's actually a way that we can tilt the scales towards regulation by intentionally practicing this stuff and being aware of it and getting better at it.
Yeah, because I know for me, especially if I'm in low dysregulation or in high dysregulation, I will get a sense of hopelessness, because what will happen is I'm like, oh, I've been here before and I don't know how to get out of it. And I don't want to use, especially as somebody like recovering from addictions or bad habits, whatever it might be, there's old coping mechanisms that I know don't work, that are the only things in when I'm feeling highly dysregulated or lowly dysregulated, that I'm feeling like, oh, these are the things I always go to, but I know those things don't work. They don't serve me at all. And they actually make me feel worse. So you can get stuck in a place of like hopelessness of, what do I do now? So what do you recommend in that place practically to get yourself back?
Yeah, no,
that's really what it is too. It's like getting yourself back, because you can recognize this isn't me. I've done this enough times. I know this isn't me. I don't like when this happens. How do I get back to just being me and in that regulation zone?
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. And I would say regulation is when you're your truest self. You are who you want to be, like you said. So to make a disclaimer, I'm not a licensed counselor or psychiatrist, but I have found in my own life and experience that there are natural things that you can do when you're in these zones. And when you're in low dysregulation, one of the things you need is dopamine. You need something to help you feel better, to lift you out of where you are. And dopamine is that experience to help us feel a little bit more excited. One of the things you can do is literally take vitamin D supplements. Vitamin D is something that we get, from the sun. So you think about spending time in the sun and you feel better afterwards. That's the feeling and experience of vitamin D. So I recently got my blood work done and found that I was low in vitamin D. So I've been taking vitamin D supplements and I literally feel a difference. So that's one very practical thing you can do. Exercise works on both ends of the spectrum. Whether you're high or low, exercise gives you what you need to regulate. You can take a nap. How often are we sleep deprived and just riding on fumes? A nap can be a great reset of that. Watching a good movie or listening to music. These are all great ways to experience dopamine and to have a movement towards regulation when you're in that low spot. Actually, another one would be dark chocolate is a way of experiencing that and feeling some pleasure that you might need, as long as it's not excessive. Dark chocolate can be pretty good for you. So different things that we can do, practically to feel a little bit more regulated.
I just ate a half a bag of pretzels today on a drive because I was feeling dysregulated. Does that count? The half a bag of pretzels that I ate on a 20-minute
I don't
drive?
think so. I think those are empty carbs.
It did make me feel better, though. I'm not going to lie. I actually felt better after I ate them. But that's really good. What do you say, like, when you're in a pinch, right? When you have to change things fast? Because sometimes that is taking a nap, working out, those sorts of things work when you have space. I know oftentimes these things come up where if you have a family, you don't have any space. What do you do in those situations?
Yeah, I think you have to create space. I think if you're in the moment and you just can't get away, deep breathing is really helpful and has a lot of scientific backing to show how it decreases cortisol, helps you regulate. And there's a technique called box breathing where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then keep empty lungs for 4 seconds. You can literally practice that in the moment, and it works really fast. So that's something you can do kind of in a crisis. But also, John and Julie Gottman, who are marriage experts, suggest from their research that it takes 20 minutes to regulate when you are, let's say you're in relational conflict and you and a spouse or significant other or coworker are just going at it and disagreeing. You need to take a time out and spend 20 minutes self-regulating before you can resolve that conflict. I would say it is impossible to resolve conflict when you're dysregulated. So don't even try.
Yeah. That's a great point too. And building space into your life, I guess, would be the precursor to all of this, to be disciplined enough to build space into your life,
right.
and to be clever enough, creative enough to find the way to put space in there. Because we can do that. It just might seem like you can't, and it's going to look different for everybody. And one thing I'll say too is just looking at these 3 lists when you're feeling depressed, or maybe you're feeling critical, or you're feeling anxiety or inadequate, you can look to the regulation column and just learn the fruits of the spirit and ask yourself, am I feeling, because I've done this, I'm like, am I feeling any of the fruits right now? I'm like, no, I'm not feeling any of them. So if I was going to feel kind, to give myself kindness, what would that look like? If I'm being impulsive, am I practicing self-control? What would it look like to have self-control right now? To have love for myself or love for other people. So there's a way of also just pausing and looking at those words and being like, what does it, we've all been to those words before. We all know what that can be like. It's like, okay, so how could I be like that right now? And just having the awareness of knowing what those are and what it would look like to step into one of those can help to begin to regulate things.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is gaining some autonomy or control in a good way, where oftentimes we feel like we're the victim of our emotions instead of actually having control over them. Or better term would be our term of regulation, to regulate those emotions and feel like we have autonomy in doing that. That's the experience of being unstuck. I think you're stuck in your emotions if you feel like they have control of you. And we've all been there, So I think we need to get curious and do the work of, like we said earlier, why am I feeling this? Is this a trigger? What happened earlier today that caused me to react this way? Mm-hmm. And that's a great question when you're with your kids. There's times where I've literally had to leave the room and go in my bedroom and lay in my bed and practice deep breathing and be like, why did I just explode at my kids? And it's because of feeling insecure earlier in the day and not dealing with it. And now all of a sudden I'm taking that out on my kids and had to literally apologize and say to them, I wasn't mad at you. I was mad at this other thing that happened earlier to me. And that's really helpful for our kids in those moments to differentiate what we're actually upset about.
It is really huge to apologize, especially to your kids, because especially as dads, this idea of like, what I say goes, right? That can be kind of stuck in your head. And it's like, no, it's really healthy to apologize and say, this is why this happened. And, you know, if you were in the wrong, to bring the thing up and bring it to light, because that teaches your kids emotional regulation. It teaches them like, oh, right, dad apologizes, I should apologize. Oh, right, dad identified what was wrong. He went and he figured it out. I should also do the same thing and know why things are, you know, off center. And that can be huge for a kid, because I think a lot of kids don't get that vulnerability and that clarity from their parents of like, right, I was wrong there. Even if your kids did do something wrong, usually if you're triggered by something early in the day and it comes up, you're going to blow up way more.
Yeah.
Or you're going to blow up instead of just correcting them, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a whole different thing.
And kids will automatically take the blame. They think it's them because they don't have the cognitive ability to differentiate between them being the cause of something or an outside source. So they automatically think it's them. Mm-hmm. So if we don't clarify, then there might actually be some wounding there or damage there where we're reacting and hurting our kids by something that had a different cause, but they think it's them. And therefore they take on that narrative. Whenever my mom or dad gets angry, it's because of me. Mm-hmm. And I work with clients on that stuff all the time that we call agreements. We agree with lies that are not true, and that actually shapes our identity. Mm-hmm. So we have to break those agreements and make new agreements with the truth, and that shapes our identity in the right direction.
Yeah, man, that's really good and very true. So it's so important. So real quick, we're going to take a pause, shout out the sponsor of the show. When we come back, though, I want to understand your story, John, how this ended up becoming your message, right? Because the message always comes from a mess. So what caused this to be something that was so pivotal for you to implement into your own life? And then how did that change your life? We'll talk about that in 1 minute. Are you struggling to make consistent, valuable content for yourself? Do you want to have an efficient and effective way to create content that attracts the people that you want to connect with in life, the people you want to build relationships with in business? Do you want to be the go-to authority at what you do, at what you're great at? Would it be helpful for you if you had a platform that connects you to incredible people in your industry? The kind of platform that gets you leads and lands you clients without you having to beat down anybody's door or blow up anybody's inbox. Whether you're already creating content or you're desiring to start and it's something that's been kind of burning inside of you for a while, I urge you and encourage you to check out the Pro Podcaster Academy. Get started right now. Join the waitlist at robzwentz.com.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world globally. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, join the Connected Leaders Academy today. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JASCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
So, John, this is so good, man. The regulation spectrum, and that's really, really helpful just to use, look at, and apply it practically into your life. But what led you to creating this? What was it about yourself that you knew had to change?
Yeah, I'd mentioned, many stories of wrestling with anger, wrestling with insecurity and shame. Shame was a big thing that I had to learn about because it often is below the surface. It's underneath something else. And shame was causing me to feel angry. And so even the relationship between shame and anger was something that I had to learn. And there was one specific story that comes to mind here and was a way to express healthy anger. But my daughter was in kindergarten and we noticed that she was coming home, and she's normally really sweet and bubbly and kind. And she was coming home frustrated and angry and just like not herself. And so we're like, what is happening? and we're trying to help her, work through her own anger, yell into a pillow, things like that. And finally, as we had a conversation with her, we realized that there was actually a bully in her kindergarten class, more than one. And they were picking on her, saying things to her, things were going on. So we brought it to the attention of the teacher, and this was right after COVID. So, and these were COVID kids, so they didn't have any kind of structured classroom before that. And it was like a perfect storm for this teacher. She's like, I'm just trying to tread water here. Yeah. They were aware of the bullies. They were starting to keep track of them, but they, had to have kind of a plan or a track record of multiple counts of bullying for them to do anything. Meanwhile, my daughter is their punching bag, and we're getting more and more reports every day of things happening, finally to the point where she was in the drive-through line waiting for us to pick her up. And one of the bullies said to the other one, watch this. And he punched her in the stomach twice. Just gut punch in kindergarten. And she's crying, when my wife picks her up, and my wife gets home and tells me the story. And as you can imagine, I'm ready to rip this principal and this teacher a new one when I'm going to deal with this right now. So thankfully, as I was walking out the door, my wife, I hear her voice in the background, remember, you're a pastor, and remember
the regulatory things you got to follow. Yes. Remember to regulate yourself.
Don't fly off the handle. So I'm driving to the school, and I'm praying, God, help me to handle this in a healthy way. And I'm literally asking myself, again, I'm not making this up. We try to live what we teach. Otherwise, we're hypocrites. So I'm asking myself the questions. What am I really angry about? Why am I upset? And I just had this clear sense when I asked that question. You're angry because there's a plan for the bullies, but there's no plan for your daughter. And it was like, bam, that's exactly. And again, it's not like the anger went away, but it regulated it so that I knew what to do with it.
Yeah.
It became a tool instead of a threat. And so with that information, I went in and talked to the principal, and she knew of the situation. She knew I was upset. You could tell she was kind of like preparing herself. And thankfully, I had enough sense about me to just take a deep breath and tell her that. I said, I'm angry because it feels like there's a plan for the bullies, but there's no plan for my daughter, who's the one who is being bullied. So can we please come up with a plan together?
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And my daughter was actually old enough to move to she was in preschool. She was in pre-K, young fives. And we moved her up to kindergarten as to try to get her out of that situation. And she ended up thriving and doing really well. But what almost made me just not even believe it was I was walking out of the principal's office, and she said to me, you could come into my office any day, because these are the kinds of conversation I want to have. Mm-hmm. And I was just besides myself, because I normally would have not handled it so well, and just grateful for the transformation in my own life in working on this stuff and applying healthy anger to these situations. It changes your life, and it helps you react in different ways.
Yeah, healthy anger directed exactly where it's supposed to go. That makes so much sense. I was just talking to my son's principal a couple of weeks ago, and he said the same thing to me. He said, I really appreciate we had to have a phone call about something that happened at school that actually didn't happen. But he was like, I appreciate just being able to talk to you about this, because he said most parents come in explosive. Unfortunately, these days, I guess, too, most parents side with their kids kind of
right.
No matter what, and are against the authority. But that's ridiculous. It has to be so hard for a teacher to deal with that. You want to come in and have a conversation. Anybody wants to just have a conversation, but you feel this righteous anger, like you're right to do what you did. And I love what you said there. You said regulate the anger so you know what to do with it. And that's really the point. When you regulate it, then you can see it clearly. Then you know how to direct it and focus it in the
right
way it needs to go to make a difference. And to take that anger and turn it into actually productive conversation, that's a whole different thing altogether. Like let alone yourself being okay, but be able to actually work that out with the person in your life the person who you're dealing with about the situation is huge and is a game changer for all of us. It's what we all carry around some sort of anger for somebody about something, I would imagine, or maybe It's just me, right? But knowing like, okay, and I think this is a good question for all of us to ask ourselves too. If you're carrying around something, maybe you're angry about something today. Why are you angry about it? What is it? And get down to the root of it. Like, what's really going on there? Identify where the anger is coming from. Regulate yourself. And how would you have that difficult conversation? And I think that's the other part of it too, though, John. And how do we have difficult conversations? That's the other part of this. Is you may have regulated that anger and known like, okay, here's why I'm angry. Here's what I got to do with it. But some people really have a hard time just beginning that conversation, like going to the teacher, right? Especially when it's somebody maybe in your life that it's a boss you've been dealing with for a long time or a family member that you've been dealing with for a long time. There could be a huge wall up there for you to actually have that conversation. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, I think part of it is actually thinking about the opposite. What causes unhealthy anger and how do I react in unhealthy anger? It's from impulsivity. It's from jumping to conclusions. It's from blame shifting and being defensive. Mm-hmm. So if we're just reacting out of that unhealthy anger and that's how we start the conversation, it's not going to go well. Whereas healthy anger is taking that 20-minute pause, like we talked about, asking the questions you just asked, which are great things to process, to regulate. And then from that information that we've discerned, going to that person and saying, here's what I was just processing about the conflict we just had. Here's where I'm wrestling with things. Here's where, when you said that thing, it reminded me of the way my parents used to talk to me, and it made me feel defensive. So I'm sorry that I overreacted at you, but I was actually reacting from my parents, not from you. And then that creates a deeper conversation that can actually lead to healing and restoration. Like, oh, wow, I didn't realize your parents would talk to you like that. I'm really sorry that happened. And I'm going to try not to say things that way. I'm going to try a different way of having a conversation so that there's a better reaction.
Yeah. Great advice, man. And speaking about emotional bandwidth also, like how do we honor that emotional bandwidth? We all have a different bandwidth that we can stand, that we're kind of like dealing with. And I know that's for sure true. So what are your recommendations there? How do we kind of honor that part of us and understand it better?
I think the first thing I would say is don't fall for comparative suffering. And by that, I mean, comparative suffering is thinking that you are better off or worse than someone else. Mm-hmm. So Rob might need, might have an emotional bandwidth of 45 minutes, but I might have one of 30 minutes. I can't say, well, I'm not as good as Rob, or I'm less of a person than Rob because his is 45 and mine's only 30. We have to honor what our own bandwidth is. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing, is what is your bandwidth? And it's not always easy to compartmentalize that in time, but what are the symptoms that you notice in yourself when you are burned out? Maybe it's just being short-tempered and not being kind. It's the absence of the fruit of the Spirit. And so when you start to notice those things in yourself, then that's like a red flag that says you need some time to regulate. If you keep going, you're going to react out of dysregulation. It's important for you to spend some time to regulate so that you can have the kind of reaction you want to have. Yeah.
And going through that enough times where you're like, yeah, I'm sick of doing this. I know it's coming, because it's coming once you become aware of it. Now it's the important part of doing something about it. So as we come to the end of this episode, I want to make sure that I highlight what you guys have going on right now. So yourself and your wife, I just want to give people the option for you and Liz to check out you guys offer up complimentary sessions, correct? And
Yes.
also you have a blog post, the regulation spectrum. We just talked about some of that on the episode, but they can go to your website, resilientcoaching.net/post/regulation-spectrum. The link is in the bio also. But what can they expect if they reach out, they want to talk to you and Liz?
Yeah, like you said, complimentary session, there's no strings attached. So just to be able to experience what coaching is like and begin to talk through what are some goals that you might want to create if you did want to coach with us and ask questions. We're not going to hold back. That's a full session where we're going to give you the tools that we have and the skills that we have for coaching to act as though this were a paid session. It's not, we're not holding anything back in terms of what we would offer, because we genuinely want to help. And that's our heart behind coaching. We want to help people. For me specifically, help them partner with God to transform their passion and pain into purpose. So we can use our pain and our things that we've gone through and heal and restore to actually turn those things into purpose. Mm-hmm. Not sometimes, but every time.
Yeah.
Our darkest moments can become our greatest moments of light that we can bring to other people. But we have to do the work on ourselves before we can bring that to other people. We can't skip that part of the work that we need to do on ourselves, which is why I respect you for doing coaching. Is you're coaching other people, you're leading other people, but you're willing to do the work yourself. And that's going to make each of us a better leader and person if we're willing to do the work on ourselves as well.
And I think that's where every good coach comes from, is they went through something, got through it, and they want to help other people with it. Make your mess your message. And I always look at it like this too. A broken bone, like the place of the break, once the healing takes place, that part of the bone is actually stronger than the rest of the bone. So like that, the part of us that was always what seemed to be the weakest, it seemed to be our crutch or our curse. When we get through it, we partner with God to find those breakthroughs, and we bring the right people into our life and learn the right strategies. That can become the strongest part of who we are, because we had to work so much on it. And I think that's what other point would there be to have to go through something very difficult, but to get through it and then to use it to help other people, because seems like the whole purpose of having the issue to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we wrap this thing up, anything you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
It's worth taking the time to regulate. I know even when we started, we're like, how do you make time when we're doing things, we're busy, and we think we just don't have time for ourselves. And that is a lie. I think we have to start with self-care. If we start with that, then we're going to be better caregivers to everyone else around us. And so we have to make time for this. It's going to lead to a much better life. It's going to lead to living in regulation instead of dysregulation. And so it's kind of like we view preventative healthcare as optional, but when we avoid it, then we have bigger problems later. This is like preventative soul care. If you do the work to be proactive about it, it's going to pay off and gain momentum in every area of your life. So do not neglect this. It's going to change your life if you make space to regulate.
Yeah, amen to that. It definitely will. And I just want to thank you for all that you do. Thank you for helping me over the past number of months. It's been really, you've given me so many nuggets and so many insightful and powerful, simple things to use that I can put into my life to give myself a new perspective on the way that I used to look at things. So I thank you a lot for that and all that you do, man. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. As always, another true testimony of breakthrough. Until next time, this is the Unstuck Movement.